What up, Cucks? It's your boy, the Hater, up in this piece, and it's time for another episode of Hater on the Road. I feel like I'm gonna start bringing my microphone with me and hold it like a singer would hold a mic, and just do that, Hater on the Road, because the weather's finally good. So the Hater is gonna be walking around a lot longer and a lot more frequently, because the Hater loves to walk around the nature. Cuckolds. Now, that being said, today's video, or the first of today's videos, I should say, is about booking, right? The concept of booking and how good booking needs to be done. You know, a lot of people have been asking for this video or my thoughts on how I would book certain things. And I'm gonna give you an example that I'm gonna make up in my head, and you can just take that formula and apply it to any situation, and you would know how the Hater would mostly book things. Now, obviously, there are certain situations, right, that are special, and they merit special considerations, right? So if the feud, for example, has certain elements that are just unique to that feud, then the booking would have to be different based on those elements. But for the most part, especially in today's wrestling, all feuds are the same. You know what I mean? Like, there's really no difference in watching AEW or WWE. There really isn't. And that's why AEW, in my opinion, falls short considerably. That's another video for another time. But let's talk about how booking should work, right? The payoff, generally speaking, is the pay-per-view, right? In the old model, this made perfect sense because the pay-per-view cost money, right? And that was a good way for the wrestling companies to make money, right? Like, if you get 1 million pay-per-view buys, that's like $30 each, let's say back in the day, 30 million, you know what I'm saying? 30 million just like that. That's on top of everything else, like sponsorships and, you know, t-shirt sales and obviously the gate and everything else, right? People have realized that you can put on a show and make a lot of money by selling it, but in order to get people excited, you have to also provide live and free TV, right? Dana White has essentially copied this business model directly from wrestling, directly from Vince McMahon, and he's made himself very, very wealthy, right? Like, Dana White doesn't have any special skills. Like, I mean, I'm sure he's a smart guy and everything, but basically his skill is just like, you know, give the people what they want, you know, within reason, and he's, I'm sure, a good businessman. But he's not like a booker or anything like that, right? There's no booking in the UFC. It's just like, all right, people like this guy, people like that guy, let's have them fight when it makes the most sense, you know? Like, in terms of, like, you know, being an innovator like Vince is, Dana White and Tony Khan and all these other people don't have what it takes, right? Vince McMahon invented this format, right? And that's not a small thing, you know? But the reason why I'm harping on about this format is because this format is the cornerstone. It is the backbone of wrestling. This is how wrestling works. So, with that being said, you would need to think of every Raw or SmackDown, if you have a brand split, every show after a pay-per-view as a natural starting point or a restarting point, right? The day after WrestleMania, that is like the season, you know, premiere. So everything should be reset, right? I don't really like this, like, more modern take where, like, the pay-per-view after WrestleMania is basically just WrestleMania again, but with, like, less fanfare, you know what I mean? It'll be like Backlash, but it'll be the same exact thing as WrestleMania. This wasn't always the case. Like, in the past, Backlash was a different thing that started with new stories, right? So a great example would be after WrestleMania 2000, like, Backlash, the feud was The Rock versus Triple H with a returning Stone Cold. Like, Mick Foley and Big Show were not part of that feud anymore, right? Things had to change. Now, with all that being said, let's go through it week by week. So the first week, you have to establish the feud, right? Sometimes the feud is established because, you know, necessity requires that some feuds are gonna last more than one pay-per-view cycle, right? But this should be very rare. Anyways, when the feud begins, it has to begin with some sort of catalyst. There has to be some sort of a logic as to why this is happening, right? The easiest thing to do is to say, this person's champion, this other person wants to be champion. But that's a little bit cheap, and we don't want that, right? We want something a bit more thorough than that, if you will, right? So you need to have a hook, basically. Now, hooks are pretty much where the storyline hinges upon, right? So that's why when I say, for example, there's no storyline between, you know, let's say Will Ospreay and MJF, and there's also no storyline between Gunther and Randy Orton, like, there's obviously the overarching storyline that every wrestler in WWE presumably wants to be WWE champion, but there's no specific storyline between the two, right? There's no, like, oh, I hate you because you kicked my dog or something like that, right? That would be more compelling than anything that we've seen in AEW and WWE in the in recent times, right? So there needs to be a hook. Another way to do it is to just have someone cost someone else a match, but for a different reason, right? So for example, let's say, I'll just use some examples here. Let's say it's Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero for the world title, right? And let's say Eddie Guerrero like slept with Booker T's wife, right? And now Booker T comes out and tries to kick Eddie Guerrero, misses, kicks Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero wins and takes away Angle's world title. Now Kurt Angle has justifiable reason to be mad at Booker T, right? But the point I'm making is you need to have a specific reason why this is happening, right? Why the people are feuding with each other, right? In my personal opinion, the trashier this is, the more compelling it can be, right? The hater's not a trashy guy, but the hater understands that kind of stuff sells and makes things more entertaining. Like, if I were to say, do you remember like any Kurt Angle feuds? I'm sure people would remember some, and they would be remembered in order of trashiness, right? Like the most memorable one probably is the one where Kurt Angle wanted to sleep with Booker T's wife, like flagrantly, right? He's like, I want to have bestiality type sex with her, Booker, right? Which was like crazy and wild, right? Obviously very lascivious, but it's something that got people interested and it made it memorable, right? The point I'm trying to make is you need a reason, right? Then the next week, right, you start establishing what the logic of the feud is, right? So how the feud is gonna play out, right? So for example, if you have like I'll give you a real life example, right? Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero over Dominic, right? Clearly one of the logical ways to end that is a ladder match, right? So you start establishing the underpinnings of the ladder match, right? By making the story about who has a better claim to Dominic, right? Now, that's not a great story because it's a little bit weird, but it's probably the most memorable Rey Mysterio storyline like ever. You know what I mean? It's like one of the only ones that he's been a part of where there's been like an actual storyline, right? There's been a few others, but it's basically that one. So, do you see what I'm saying? Now, every other subsequent week, you have to plan out the way that the week is going to go and the way that, the number of weeks are going to work together, right? Because that's going to depend. Let's say the pay-per-view is in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You may need to speed some things up, right? But then this is where the most important part comes. The feud, the storyline, the program, whatever, all of those have to slowly but surely crescendo towards the payoff, right? So let's just say, I'll give an example of, let's just say you're gonna have like a bloody hardcore type match between two people, right? Let's say it was, I don't know, Adam Page and Swerve Strickland, they're gonna do it again, right? Now, we're looking forward to this extremely violent match, right? Like a great example would be that like the Jon Moxley one versus, I forget who it was, Kenny Omega, I guess, the one where like the arena was gonna blow up or whatever and nothing happened. Something like that. If something like that were to happen, right, we would need a crescendoing of violence. So the first week, maybe one person beats someone with a chair severely, right? And now you're like, oh shit, things got serious. The second week, you have the other guy, or maybe the same guy, but you want to do some 50-50 booking here to see, to have the payoff, right? Then the second guy, I don't know, puts like the guy through 2 tables or something, right? Then the third week, the guy throws him into thumbtacks. I don't know. It has to get progressively more violent. So then the payoff, you're like, oh my God, we've seen like chairs, thumbtacks, tables. What's next, right? And then you deliver with the payoff, right? The same thing can be done, not just with matches, but with storylines, right? So for example, one attempt that they try to do this is the strap match between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, right? The strap match makes sense because the whole idea is Drew McIntyre keeps running away from CM Punk, basically, right? Like that's the post pay-per-view feud is like, oh, Drew McIntyre keeps running away, even though Drew McIntyre beat him. So CM Punk now is like, you can't go anywhere because, we're attached to each other. Or as CM Punk eloquently put it, you're not attached to me, I'm attached to you. What a loser. Anyways, so the point is, you have this match, right? Now, from now until the pay-per-view, which they have like only a few weeks because they didn't do it correctly, there needs to be some strap involvement. So for example, maybe next week, Drew McIntyre hangs CM Punk with the strap, like to end the show or to end the program, right? Maybe, the week after that, CM Punk gets the upper hand and like just beats him with the strap some more. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff, right? There needs to be some sort of strap involvement. So then when it's time for the strap match, you're like, oh man, I saw a lot of cool things. I wonder what's going to happen now. The only problem with this is that strap matches are kind of boring, you know? Like at least the one with like JBL and Eddie Guerrero, which was awesome. They had like the little cowbell in the middle, which was basically like a built-in weapon, which was a great little addition. Nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is exactly that we need the booking to be reflective of what's happening, right? Booking where people come out and say the same thing again and again and again, and nothing is advanced, is not sufficient because nobody cares about the match at the pay-per-view, right? This is especially evident when we're talking about mid-card feuds. See what I'm saying? So let's say like, let's say that there's like a new mid-card feud brewing between, okay, we'll use this example. Santos Escobar versus LA Knight. Like they're gonna talk some shit and then they're gonna have a match. Nobody's gonna care. Nobody cares at all about Santos Escobar versus LA Knight. Now imagine if Santos Escobar said, hey, puto, I fucked your wife, let's say, right? Let's just go with it for a second. Now, the feud becomes personal. And let's say the next week, it's like a vignette of Santos Escobar like spying on LA Knight's wife, right? And then like there's another, vignette the next week where like he tries to spy on him and LA Knight just beats him up. Like finds him and beats him up, right? This is something that would be much more compelling than, I've beaten you before and I'll beat you again. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's not compelling, like nobody cares. So if there was a payoff, like a storyline payoff, right? Then everyone would be engaged in the storyline. Now, beyond that, we also have the other possibility. Once the storyline ends, that should be it. It's done, right? They both move on to other storylines. But if this is done correctly, now we have established the characters a bit more. We have progressed the characters a bit more. Now, let's say that Santos Escobar, after this made-up feud that I concocted in my head, let's say that Santos Escobar is someone that now, that's like part of his character. He just goes after like other wrestlers' women or, whatever, right? Now, you can be like, okay, who has a woman in the roster? Oh, Karrion Kross, let's say, and Scarlett, right? Let's say now he goes after Scarlett, right? So basically, every man now has to defend themselves and their women from the lascivious Santos Escobar. Now, you tell me, motherfucks. You tell me honestly, what's more compelling? The Santos Escobar that I just invented in these last 20 seconds, or the one that we have on TV? You tell me. You tell me which Santos Escobar is more interesting. Exactly. And this Santos Escobar can be like, then you can turn him face and be like, I've learned the error of my ways. He can get me too'd or something. I don't know. You can think of different ways to push him forward, right? Same thing. Maybe like Karrion Kross gets attacked and LA Knight comes back and saves Scarlett, right? Because he knows that Santos Escobar is a bad guy. I don't know. You could do so many things with this, but why do all that when instead you could just do absolutely nothing? You have like wrestlers nowadays, like Seth Rollins is a great example. This guy's like, he fucking sucks. Like he doesn't even show up anymore at this point, right? He was gone for like 4 months, prior to WrestleMania, and he basically didn't do anything. They kept him the champion for some strange reason. Then he lost the title in night 2, but he was in the main event of night 1 as the champion, right? And then what happened? Then he left. Then he came back. Now he's gone again. He was referee. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? People are like, a well-deserved break. What do you mean a well-deserved break? This guy's been on break for like a whole year. So with all that being said, this is what I'm getting at here, right? Like it's like Seth Rollins is now entering the Randy Orton stage of his career, but he's not contributed as much as Randy Orton, right? And he's still ripe for booking. But what can you do? I don't make the rules. The big guys do. So take that for what it is, but recognize that my methods of booking make more sense and they're more intelligent. Cuckolds.